Today we're going to spend a few minutes talking about living as God's people in a complex world. And we're going to be looking at 1 Peter chapter 2 verses 13 to 17. And this is coming from the standpoint of, Peter's relaying to us the importance of living in this world with such integrity and respect that our lives become a testimony of God's transforming power, even when it's hard. A lot of times we come into a situation and it's difficult and how to deal with the things that are happening in the world. How do we do so with integrity and respect to show the power of God in our lives? Because the dilemma that we find ourselves in, and Peter did too back in his day, is that we're torn between two areas. We can either be a good Christian, or we're to be good Christians, but we're also to be good citizens. But a lot of times those things don't mesh. So how do we live godly lives in a corrupt world, in a challenging world? We're torn between these two. How do we respond when our government makes decisions that we don't agree with? How do we respond in those situations? Do we vent about it? Vent about our leaders, whether on social media or we meet people for breakfast and our friends around the table and we're bad-mouthing the government and the decisions that we make? Well, the truth of the matter is we're not alone, and this is nothing new. You could look back at Peter's world. When he wrote this, he was living in the Roman Empire. And in the Roman Empire, it encompassed this whole area. It encompassed Africa and Israel and Turkey and what is that, Europe and all those areas. And Rome had absolute power in all things. And so Peter is writing during this time in the Roman Empire. He's writing from this area called Asia Minor, which would be modern-day Turkey. And he was dealing with a man, Emperor of Nero, who was brutal to the Christians. And he's the emperor that eventually would kill Peter. But Nero was the one that saw Christians were dangerous. They were outsiders. And he actually, I believe he's the one that used Christians, burnt them at the stake to light up the city. That was the way he provided light for his people, by burning Christians. And so they were considered dangerous and outsiders because of the rumors that were told about these Christian people. They were atheists, they were cannibals, they were troublemakers. And we were told that they refused to worship the emperor as God. And because of that, they were seen as disloyal to Rome. And because of that, they faced increasing persecution. And so Peter's writing this to this group of Christians that are being persecuted by the Roman Empire. And we get to 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 13 to 17. Now, up until this point, Peter's telling these Christians, remember, you are living stones who are being built into a spiritual house. You're a holy priesthood, a royal priesthood. You're a chosen people, a holy nation, God's holy people who have received God's mercy. And he says, live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they will see your good deeds and glorify your God when he arrives. And then he says, but this is one of the ways you can do this. He says, submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every human authority, whether to the emperor as the supreme authority, or to governors who are sent by him to punish those who do wrong and to commend those who do right. Live as free people, but do not use your freedom as a cover-up for evil. Live as God's slaves. Show proper respect to everyone. Love the family of believers. Fear God. Honor the emperor. And so those are his instructions to these persecuted people who are being chased by these Roman leaders. And he says, I want you to submit to them. Well, what does submit mean? The Greek definition of submit means to arrange yourself under. So to come under the authority of someone else. And so Peter's saying, okay, here's the emperor, Nero. We know all about him. But I want you to arrange yourself under him. Come under his rule. Submit to him. Now, it's not blind obedience, just doing whatever he says, whether we think we should or not. But at the same time, it's respectful cooperation. And I think a great example of that, recent example for us, back in 2020, COVID-19, and I won't get into the shot debate, the vaccine debate, but wearing the mask. I thought it was kind of silly to wear a mask at the beginning. And I'd rather not wear a mask, but choosing to wear one for the sake of others, that's where God wants us to be. Not blind obedience, I wear a mask because the government tells me to wear a mask. More so, it's respectful cooperation. They want you to wear a mask. They say it's for your benefit, but we can look at it for the benefit of others. Now, yes, I did get the shot and I wore a mask. I didn't want to, but going into nursing homes, that was the right thing to do for these other people, not for me, but for them. And that's what submit means. We submit to that authority, not blind obedience, but respectful cooperation to what they tell us to do or where they lead us to go. And when we submit, he says, do so for the Lord's sake, because we represent Jesus. A good question to ask might be, what message does our behavior send? Because our behavior, it reflects who Jesus is. You've heard me say many times, when the world sees us, they're seeing Christ in the flesh. If he is living his life in us and through us, they are seeing Christ. And so if we are known as the most respectful and law-abiding citizens in our community, it will open the door for other conversations. It might open the door for the gospel message. And Peter, he acknowledges the fact that governments, they're human institutions, they're imperfect, they're sometimes corrupt, they're often misguided, but they still deserve respect because God has allowed that system into place to maintain order in our society. And in this submitting for the Lord's sake, he says, live as free people, but do not use your freedom as a cover-up for evil. Live as God's slaves. You're free, but you're a slave. And so there's that paradox of freedom. False freedom says we can do whatever we want. And if we're not careful, we say, hey, I'm saved by the grace of God. I preach that all the time. Not by works, but that doesn't mean we can go do whatever we want. True freedom is we have the power to do what is right. I don't have to go into the temptation. I don't have to buy into the temptation that's before me. False freedom says I can do whatever I want, but true freedom means I have the power to do what is right. False freedom says that we are a slave to our desires, that I need to meet my desires no matter what. But true freedom says that we are free from sin and fear. You know, those sinful desires that attack us. False freedom says I can go ahead and I can fulfill those desires. True freedom says I don't have to. I am free from sin. I am free from fear. False freedom says that we are self-focused. It's all about me. Where true freedom says you're others focused. And I was just talking about this last week in one of the groups that I was with. You know, the selfishness, even within the church. Why do people go to church? Well, I go to church because I like the music. I love the preacher. I like the youth activities. I like the children's program. It's all about me, 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 me. When in reality, when we go to church, it should be about Him. We are coming to give back to Him, not just to receive for ourselves. And so that false freedom, it's all about me, to turning that around and it's others focus. Because that true freedom, it's not about a license to go do whatever we want. It's giving us that ability to serve those around us. And in this passage, so he says, submit for the Lord's sake. You're free, but don't use your freedom because you're God's slave. Peter gives a 4-part formula on how to live the godly lives in the world, in this complex world that we live in. He says that we need to respect everyone, that we need to love the believers, that we need to fear God and honor the emperor. That's verse 17. Respect everyone, show respect to everyone, show love to the believers, fear God, honor the emperor. And you look at this, submit to those over us. Submit to those over us because, for the Lord's sake. Well, if we focus on these things, ultimately, if we fear God, all the others will fall into place. If we fear God, it will help us to build a respect for all people. If we fear God, it will help develop that love that we have for other believers, that family that we are part of. If we fear God, we will be able to honor the emperor, even during hard times. Even those that are difficult, those leaders that are difficult to accept and to follow, we can still show honor to them. But how are we to deal with any of the pressure that we face of being that good Christian over a good citizen when there is that struggle to mesh those two? How are we to deal with those things? Well, there's 2 wrong approaches that often happen. One is people completely withdraw from society. They don't vote. They're not involved in community events, affairs. They separate themselves completely. But that really doesn't help. More likely, and this is what I see most of the time, people begin to have politics as their religion. They become so politically engaged that their faith becomes secondary to their political identity, which is detrimental in so many ways. And people, excuse me, I have brought this up, and I know people don't necessarily agree with me on this. They're just saying politics, they want their party in office. But it gets to the point where that becomes religion. They're so focused on their party or that singular person that needs to be in that role that everything else is pushed aside. It's as if that the party representation is more important than God Himself. And people will say, oh, that's not true. But when the other party, your opposing party, gets into office, you complain the whole time. Instead of saying, I don't agree with that, but God's got him there for a purpose. Because we can vote our conscience, we can vote what we believe is right, but God is the one who puts people into power. And so we have to be careful that politics doesn't become a religion. But there is a third way. Peter's third way. He talks about our citizenship is in God's kingdom. We are citizens of heaven that are temporarily assigned to earth. And because of that, it should make us better participants in this earthly life, that we should be more honest and respectful and concerned with doing good for those around us. Because when we live that way, it silences any critics, not through the arguments that we can have with others, but through the power of God that has transformed our lives. And you think back at how Christians, how believers, the work of believers has affected people in the past and up to today. Christian actions from the past included caring for plague victims. Back during the plagues, we're told that most people ran away, but it was the Christians that stayed to help those who were sick. They put themselves in danger for their love of people. It's Christians who were rescuing abandoned babies, and we're still doing that today in a different form, but it used to be people would drop their babies off at the church steps. And the Christians would take those abandoned babies in and care for them. It was the Christians that put together orphanages. It was Christians that would feed the hungry, and that goes back all through Scripture. God gave Adam and Eve everything in the garden was good to eat, up till Moses leading the people through the wilderness, and God fed them with the manna, to Jesus feeding the 5,000. I mean, and we're still feeding the hungry today. But it's that Christian action, that care and that love for others. Or the fact that it was a Christian that started hospitals and schools. They wanted something better for the people. And so they brought these institutions together. And I think about schools, excuse me. Think about a place like, I think it's Duke University is a seminary, a Christian school that has been taken over by the world. But most schools have not. Most schools have been started because of Christian faith. Hospitals, our local ones, Lutheran Hospital, it's Lutheran. It was started by Christians. But that's how we are supposed to live, to show living God's life in a complex world, is doing good and being good. And so 6 ways to live out this faith, living out as God's people in a complex world. 1 is simply speak respectfully. When we speak about others or to others, be respectful. Maybe before we say anything, that we pause to see if it's something, and think about, is this something that is uplifting? Is it something that really needs to be said? Or should I just keep my mouth closed? And I think about that, and I pick on people, but I talk about this a lot in a restaurant setting. You're there with your friends. You're having a meal together. You're all on the same page, politically, spiritually, all that. And you're complaining about people within your churches, complaining about the people in the city or in the town. You're complaining about the leaders, the politics of things. And if others see you or hear you talking about those things, it is a detriment to the Christian faith. We're not to be that way. We're to be uplifting and encouraging and respectful. And so when we're speaking about others or to others, speak respectfully. 2, remember that small things matter. The little things that we do can actually have a big impact. You go shopping, you go get your groceries, and you take it out to your car, you load up your car, and then what do you do with the cart? Do you leave it at your space because you don't want to walk the 10 feet to the cart corral? Or do you put it away? Put the cart away. It's a simple thing. It may be meaningless to you, but it's an example of being kind and courteous. Those small things matter. Abiding by the speed limit laws. And I know that's an area, I cheat on that one too. Anymore you can go 5-10 miles over the speed limit. It's not that big a deal. But if you're doing that, know that if you get pulled over, you can get a ticket. But if we follow the law of the land, there's no fear. Or filing our taxes, not cheating the system. I hate paying taxes. All of us do. I pay my quarterly taxes and I get to the end of the year and I still owe money. And it's so frustrating. But just do your part. There's a quote that says, faithful in little, faithful in much. God says that. If you're faithful in the little things, you will be faithful in a lot of things. And today in our service, we're going to be singing a song at the end. Little is much when God is in it. So those small things matter. It may not seem like a big deal. It's not. But it can have a major effect on those that watch our actions. 3, know that prayer changes things. And especially we're talking about living in this complex world and the leaders that are above us, that are in authority over us, that we pray that they will have the wisdom when they make decisions, godly wisdom, that they and their families will be protected, that salvation or spiritual growth will come to those who are in leadership positions, and that they will have the courage to do the right thing. Prayer can change things. If it doesn't change them, it changes us if we are willing to pray. And so keep that in mind as you go through your day. Number 4, we need to just serve our community. And there's many things that you can do. You can help at a food bank. You can go to the school and help with kids that are struggling with their reading and help them and give them a chance to read to you. We can clean up the roads near our homes or in our communities. Just do a neighborhood cleanup. We can go to the hospitals or to different organizations and just volunteer our time. And when people see us serving those in the community, not for our own benefit, we're serving simply because we want to serve God in that way. Number 5, we need to disagree without being disagreeable. And that's that language between destructive or constructive. What we say, are we destroying someone or are we building someone up? If you have a disagreement, it's probably not good to tell someone you're an idiot for what you believe in. Maybe it's better to say, I see it differently than you do. I don't agree with the way you're thinking. You're not an idiot. I just see it differently. Or instead of personally attacking someone, that you focus on the important issues of what the debate is about. Or instead of having to win at all costs, that we seek to understand the other side. So disagree. We can disagree, but disagree without being disagreeable. And number 6, know that we have freedom to serve. And I'll go back to the traffic analogy. We follow the traffic laws for everyone's benefit. It's not just for us, or it's not just because the leader said we have to do this. It's for protection. I think just in town this week, they put up a new 4-way stop. I don't know if you know it, downtown Market Street and Marion maybe. But it's there for our safety. If we're driving down the highway and we see a merging sign, if there's a car coming down the ramp, we know that we probably should get over so that person can slide in. It's for their protection, our protection. If we come to a yield sign, or for a lot of people, the dreaded roundabout, we come up to the yield sign. If there isn't anything coming, keep going. Don't stop and make everybody behind you mad. It's there for your protection. It's there to help things flow better. But ultimately, that freedom to serve, freedom isn't doing what we want, but having the power to do what we should. because our witness is always going to be stronger than our words. Let me close with this. What if Christians were known as the most respectful citizens in our town? And I'm sure we can think of people in our own community, and we know what church they go to. And there's a certain feel about who those individuals are. There's something about them, and maybe we don't like it. Maybe they aren't respectful. But what would happen if Christians were known as the most respectful people in town? How would that affect our community? What if our lives preach louder than our words? It does. If we are living out our life for Christ, for God, our actions are louder than what our words are. You know, I can't hear what you're saying over the actions that you're doing. You know, it's if we're saying one thing and living a totally different life, our witness is meaningless. And what if we loved like Jesus, even those who oppose us? Even those that don't like us, we still love them like Jesus did. Because think about this, the way of Jesus. He submitted to unjust authorities. He ended up on the cross. But he won the ultimate victory. He was living as God's only son in a complex world. Lost his life, but he won the ultimate victory. And that's the hope that we have. We serve a God that loves all people. And he wants us to live out our faith. And I've said this many times, if people are seeing us, they should be seeing Jesus in the flesh. Because if we believe in Christ, his Spirit is in us. We no longer live, but Christ lives in us. And when we go out into the world and we serve God through that faith, individually and corporately, we are the expression of Christ in a lost world. So I hope you'll join me in living out our godly lives in a complex world through that relationship that we have with God through Christ. Well, God bless you. Hope you have a wonderful week, and I hope to see you next time. God bless.